I am a child and adolescent psychotherapist and a school counsellor here. I started 5 years ago, so I was coming in 1 day a week. And then 3 years ago, they asked me to go full time because the need in this catchment area is quite high. I think historically Hackney Wick, although it's different now, there was a lot of temporary housing, a lot of women who were fleeing domestic violence. I know there's a very strong community hub here, but there was also the very transient families with problems that moved here. You know, Hackney Wick, I used to describe it as the armpit of Hackney. I mean, I've lived in Hackney for about over 20 years. And I used to come down here sometimes or pass through and be like tumbleweed, there'd be no one here. Now it's like the change is phenomenal. I think that's quite unsettling as well.
That has an effect on the children itself, does it?
I've seen a rise in families with housing issues. We have families in hostels who've stayed there for quite a while, who don't seem to be being rehoused.
I suppose you've also got people with a bit more money moving in as well. And then there's a bit more class conflict, I guess, is there?
I mean, I can't comment because I don't actually live here, but I've had a mum who, for instance, who came and she said, I just popped into that sandwich shop and, there's all these things on the bread. What is that? You know, and it's seeded bread. And so it's like a cultural invasion. And I think because it's happening very fast, there will be a few rumbles. It's like the haves and the have-nots all squeezed into one area. So I think there's a lot of people who probably feel quite displaced. I think there's a process called seeding, I think, where developers put in very groovy things and they let artists come and rent places cheap, and it kind of gives a little bit of a selling point for when they start building. I think there are winners and losers, and I think sometimes, I've spoken to some of the people in the CAFs and they wanted to invite the families in, and I think that was very generous but maybe a little bit naive. They wouldn't understand the discomfort, probably. They just wanted to welcome everybody in.
Would you say that your job is one of those jobs which is really at the kind of cutting edge of some of these changes?
Definitely the impact, the stress on the families, of course it filters down to the children. And a lot of the families that I can access wouldn't make it into other services. They wouldn't get themselves in. I liaise quite a lot with CAMS. CAMS is Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, so they're part of the NHS.
Tell me about what your job actually entails. What do you do?
Sometimes social workers will refer them to me. I've got a few children who are on child protection or child in need. So I would see those children for, they call it the therapeutic hour, 50 minutes every week. Sometimes we might have a target to build towards. Sometimes I think some of these children have so many external services and social workers and people asking them questions, and they just need a space to be so they can just let everything go and play, really, because play is very, very key. We have, children who don't have, I call them the motherless child, developmental needs that haven't been met. I can sort of provide that.
Is one of the problems with your job then that perhaps some of the children get too attached to you? They're looking for a surrogate mother and you're the obvious candidate.
It's interesting. I guess it is. It's about my ability to draw those boundaries. Sometimes at the beginning, where you have a lot of transferential stuff, but as we work through that, children tend to sort of settle a bit more. And interestingly, I often know when the work is finished, they just don't really want to come. They'll come and see me, but they're just sort of, it's like they've come to the petrol station, they filled up, and they're off again.
How important would you say your role is? I mean, this is a difficult question to ask you, but how important would you say your role is in the school?
I do speak with a lot of teachers, and sometimes I'll come in and bare their souls. I have children that bring other children to me if they think they're upset. I have mums that ask to see me. So when people start to come to me, that's when I know that this is working.
Do you ever worry about your job continuing to be funding? Because it's exactly the kind of thing that...
Exactly. Yeah, it is a concern. And of course, within the NHS, the mental health support for children seems to be reducing. I have friends who are out of work now, and while the need is becoming greater because of the pressures, social pressures.